Okay, boys, I wanted to take some time today just to talk about some of the broader, so I suppose bringing together some of the larger big ideas that we've been talking about, making some connections between the two texts using this end of part two, this introduction to Somax, that perhaps feels quite different to the voice that we've had so far in Malouf's story. We've had Priam, we've had Achilles, and their voices, and all of a sudden we get a very different voice, a less regal voice, as sort of our guide through this novel's journey. So, just in order to anticipate, and before we look at these moments in the text of Somax's introduction, I just wanted to frame it by thinking about these broader implications. My color coding still remains very much the same here. Everything sort of I've got highlighted in green there as our big ideas. These are the conceptual ideas that are being explored here. We've got notions, ideas that we might be able to articulate about change, breaking traditions, leadership as well. Everything in red that we've got there, really sort of that individual text consideration of those ideas, maybe making some links to the Queen here, and some central differences that I've got highlighted there in yellow if we're looking at this section here. There. So I suppose just to preface the conversation before we look at this moment, we're looking here at Somax as an agent of change. If Priam has been seeking this change, if he knows that this is something that he wants to undertake, then he is going to need someone by his side to allow him to move through that stage. And that, as the family court scene perhaps reflects, that can't necessarily be anyone in his sphere currently because they are so steeped in that tradition. So he is that physical embodiment of the something new that he is seeking. I suppose something to be thinking about there is, if we are to link this to the Queen and think of similar figures, this is Blair. This is the public that we see in those the media spots, those montages of public responses as a result of Diana's death and the frustration. This is the media and their voice. Those are the agents of change that Elizabeth is grappling with, and there's your central difference, that Priam is seeking that change. Elizabeth is very much grappling with and pushing against it. Coming back to notions around leadership, what makes a good leader, or the challenges of breaking from tradition, what's required of change. So those ideas perhaps floating around in our head as we look at this moment that Malouf provides us. So if we zoom in here and look at these sections, I've made some preliminary notes. I'm going to read out certain sections. I don't want this to be a really lengthy video, but just to perhaps hone in on a few important moments as Malouf allows the two men to share the space together. Okay, and I say men there, that is what Priam is seeking. He's seeking to involve himself or shed that image of the king. He needs someone by his side that is going to allow him to do that. Look at the way Priam sees Somax as he enters. So it is that there appears in the palace courtyard, not long after, a stocky fellow of 50 or so, bull-shouldered, shock-headed, with a countryman's spade-shaped beard, rough cut and of an iron grey colour. A carter with a reputation among the market people for being reliable enough, but when he has a drink or two, a bit of a madcap, and the owner of 2 strong black mules. His name is Somax. There's a simplicity to the introduction of the man. There's no fanfare. Even his description is strong. He's unpredictable, bull-shouldered, iron grey. In his homespun robe and broken sandals even. He's not wealthy. He's without the decadence of this world that Priam occupies. And we see this shift, this perspective shift, begin to take place as we go into Somax's vision of the world around him in the palace. A plain workman, he has had no experience till now of princes. He is dazzled by the cleanness, the whiteness of everything here, the arms, necks, faces of the women, of some of the men too, who look as if they have never seen sunlight. The columns, the walls of polished stone, the pavement with not a straw in sight, the plump-breasted fan-tailed doves that go strutting around a fountain in a formal way, as if they had been trained to do it, dipping their beaks into its pool. This is, utopic, this vision of brilliance in the palace, but it's also something that feels constrained. It feels almost too perfect from Somax's eyes. And yet, he hangs his head and studies the pavement between his feet. There is still that reverence. He still holds the respect, because after all, he is before his king. We get now a description of beauty. A little black thing, strong in the withers but also dainty. Her winning nature has much to do with her intelligence, which is there for all to see, and with the fact that she notices people and responds in such a lively way to their interest. Beauty, he calls her. He has raised her up himself, coaxing and sweet-talking her, rewarding her with tidbits from his palm, scratching her downy ears and whispering his small secrets to her. We get that description of beauty at this early stage, and I think that's Maloof just planting the seed of Somax's devotion to her. We obviously learn about the change that befalls Somax in his son's death and the role that beauty plays in that. We don't know the full picture yet, but it's hidden there. Okay, and if we're going back to Somax, I suppose, almost teaching Priam what change provides, what forgiveness provides, then this is certainly Maloof planting that seed there. And look how Maloof allows them to share this space together. He is surprised how old he looks, how sunken and deeply scored the cheeks and deeply set in their sockets and milky pale eyes under their straggle of white brows. It's Somax noticing the age in Priam. He's king still. So, Priam says at last, "They have explained to you what we are to do?" The man nods. He does not know how he should address the king, and is conscious, among so much lilting and wisping, of his own harsh-sounding gutturals. Okay, there's that tension between them. We can see Priam's formality coming through. They have explained what you are to do. There's no sense of comfort between either man here. And yet, the way Maloof has these perspective shifts moving between the two gives us a sense of an immediate connection. Or at the very least, they are bound in some way together. It's interesting now to see Somax's response to this formality. All the members of the court take a second look at him and clap their hands, but in a restrained and formal way, with a sound so pitter-pat small that the pigeons are barely disturbed in their dipping and promenading. The man Somax is inclined to chuckle. He is mocking the formality of it. If we needed a vision of the different, the new, the unaccustomed that Somax brings, there it is. He's inclined to chuckle at the formality of all of this. The moments that follow, I suppose I don't want to rush here, but by the same token, I'm wary of perhaps providing too dense a look at this. If we're trying to grasp the important takeaway from these moments, perhaps it is this contrast that we're seeing between Priam's vision of this moment and what it means, him still being steeped in that tradition and uncertain what change looks like and what's required of him, as well as then also seeing Somax butting up against this formal world. Okay, and Maloof really highlighting their differences, but suggesting that this, in some way, there is some positivity, even if uncomfortable and unaccustomed and difficult, that it is still necessary, that there is still something on the horizon to look forward to, even despite this awkwardness, let's say. So Priam here on the left is still being led. He's not fully released of his binds. The Carter resembles so completely the figure in his dream. There's a hope of something to come and what it might entail, but there's still that uncertainty there. And also being on the right-hand side here, Somax's being named Aedeas. He is called Aedeas, since you will be my only companion on this journey. This is how I will think of you, and how you, my man, should think of yourself. From now on, your name is Aedeas. Somax's response, as he so often is described when he is uncomfortable. He shuffles, rubs his nose. That rubbing of nose is such a feeling of discomfort. He's not comfortable with this change. And I think that discomfort lands quite clear when we shift back into his perspective a little bit more closely. But in fact, it is not very well with him, not at all. His name is Somax. It fits him. He's always thought rather well. He has been comfortable with it, warm and very much himself for a good 50 years, give or take a little. So Somax is comfortable in that name. Maybe we're getting for the first time this change that Somax has to undertake himself, this change in his life. Okay, so maybe there is that symbolism of a name change. Perhaps we're thinking about Priam earlier. Is a name who you are, being Priam before as Podark. And if we go further again, here's perhaps another moment where this contrast between the two worlds is being really amplified in this symbol of Jove's emblem incorrectly being labelled by the palace elite and the royalty. At last the tension breaks and someone notices high up under thin clouds a bird hanging with wings extended in the blue. The carter thinks, chicken hawk, riding the updraft and hanging there on the lookout for a field mouse in the furrows below, or a venturesome hamster or vole. Somax the practical, thinking about, what this is and what it's doing. Perhaps the royalty here looking for a sign, that steeped tradition, that world of, devotion to fate and the gods, and looking for a sign of confirmation that this is the right thing to do. Prompted by his mother, the priest Helenus proclaims it as an eagle. The carter is surprised by this, though no one else appears to be. The whole assembly raises its eyes, and the murmur fills the court is one of wonder and relief. Clear for all to see, Jove's emblem and messenger is hovering there, holding them, these mighty representatives of Troy and the many thousands of people outside the palace, in the city and in the villages and provinces beyond, in the quivering net of its celestial attention and concern. It's almost a sarcasm in Malouf's description there, that it is irony, okay, that faith perhaps is sometimes misguided, but they are attempting to find reason in the gods. So these people are still bound by their devotion to faith. Something that Iris has perhaps earlier tried to strike down, that things aren't necessarily as they always should be. If we jump just towards the end here, we get this connection once again to Jove's eagle, though it isn't, the irony of it. But also, I think that there is this sense of not foreboding, but perhaps this feeling of potential success, that, yes, there is the uncertainty there in both Somax and Priam, two men that do not know each other, live very separate lives, but by going on this journey together, perhaps there is something to look forward to, some kind of hope that comes from this change, that springs from this change. So whatever it was is over, or mysteriously has just begun. As something dies, something is born. Okay, and that's perhaps what change is evoking here. It is requiring effort, but that there is something positive that comes from it. So I hope that the closer look at these moments just perhaps provides some sense of, perhaps evidence to support some of these ideas here, both in Ransom. Maybe you're thinking about some links that could be made to the Queen. Also thinking about the broader conceptual big ideas there in green of what's required to break tradition, the difficulties of change, but perhaps the benefits of it as well, and maybe some of the roles that leaders have in, the traditions either being broken or being upheld. Hope this helps, guys.